Right now, at this exact moment in history, the most powerful companies on Earth and the governments of the most powerful nations are spending trillions of dollars competing to build something they cannot fully explain, cannot fully predict, and cannot guarantee will act in human interests. Not a weapon, not a territory, not a resource. Intelligence itself. Artificial General Intelligence, AGI, a system capable of intellectual and creative work at or above human level across essentially any domain without being specifically trained for each one. And the economic question that almost nobody is framing clearly enough is this: what happens to a civilization, its economy, its money, its concept of work, its entire structure of who gets what and why, when that civilization was built around one foundational assumption that AGI directly challenges? Because I want to be clear about something from the very start of this video. AGI is not just the next technology wave. Every technology wave in history has disrupted industries, created new ones, and reshuffled who holds economic power. AGI may be doing something categorically different, something that previous technology waves never touched. And to understand why, to understand what AGI actually does to the economy at the deepest structural level, I need to show you a pattern first. A pattern that has repeated itself across every major economic transition in documented history. Because once you understand this pattern completely, you will understand exactly why AGI is simultaneously following that pattern, and why it may be breaking the pattern's most foundational assumption for the first time in 10,000 years of human economic history. That is not a small claim. I want to be honest about that from the start. But by the end of this video, built on documented history, research, and the positions of the world's most credible scientific and economic voices, you will have a framework for thinking about this that most people do not have. Not certainty. Nobody has certainty on this topic. A framework. And right now, given what is being built and how fast, that framework is genuinely valuable. Before we talk about AGI specifically, I need to show you something. There is a pattern, a documented repeating, structural pattern that appears every single time a major economic transition happens in history. And this pattern is so consistent across wildly different technological contexts and time periods that it stops looking like coincidence. It starts looking like a law. Across every major transition I examined in documented modern economic history, the same sequence appears. Element 1. A new productive force emerges, something that dramatically increases how much value can be created and delivered to the world. Element 2. Those who create the most value through that new productive force receive the largest economic reward from the world, proportional to the scale of what they contribute to human prosperity and growth. Element 3. The contributions of the previous economy, the skills, capabilities, and systems that the world was previously rewarding, become less central to the new economy's value creation. The world redirects its rewards toward whoever is now contributing the most to its growth. 3 elements, same sequence. Every time. Let me show you exactly what this looked like, because the specifics matter more than the abstract description. The Industrial Revolution, Britain, roughly 1760 onwards. Before this transition, economic value was produced primarily by human physical labor applied to land. Land was the primary store of wealth. Agricultural skill was what the economy rewarded most directly. Then the steam engine arrived. Mechanized production, coal, iron. Factories that could produce in a day what hand labor produced in a month. And here's the thing that history books rarely frame with enough structural clarity. The people who captured the largest economic rewards from the Industrial Revolution were not necessarily the people who invented the underlying technology. They were the people who contributed the most value to the world through that technology, at the largest scale. Carnegie built the integrated steel supply chain that made large-scale construction, railways, and industrial production possible across an entire nation. The world needed that contribution desperately. Cities were growing, railways were expanding, bridges needed to be built. Carnegie made all of that possible at scale, and the world rewarded him with wealth proportional to the value he delivered. Rockefeller built the refining and distribution system that turned crude oil into usable fuel and industrial inputs for every household and business in America. Before Standard Oil, oil refining was chaotic, inefficient, and inaccessible at scale. Rockefeller solved that. The world needed that problem solved, and it rewarded him proportionally for solving it. The world created enormous demand for what these builders made possible, and economic reward flowed to those who contributed most directly and most powerfully to meeting that demand. That is element 2 of the pattern. The people who contributed the most value to the world through the new productive force received the largest economic rewards. Because that is precisely how the world has always valued and rewarded human contribution to its growth and prosperity. And the scale of that reward was not arbitrary. It was directly proportional to the scale of the problem they solved, and the number of people whose lives genuinely improved because they solved it. That is the honest story of the Industrial Revolution's wealth creation. The world needed something. Someone contributed the solution at scale. The world rewarded that contribution with wealth, fame, and net worth commensurate with the value delivered. That principle is element 2, and it has never changed. Element 3, land, which had been the primary store of wealth for centuries, did not disappear in value overnight. But its relative economic position, compared to industrial capital, declined substantially over the decades following the transition. A significant landowner in 1750 was economically powerful. A significant factory owner in 1850 was dramatically more economically powerful than an equivalent landowner. The asset class of the previous economy lost relative value to the asset class of the new one. Same three elements: new productive force, infrastructure owners capture surplus, previous economy's assets lose relative value. Now, before I show you the second and third confirmation of this pattern, I want to mention something briefly. Because what I am building toward in this entire video is a framework for understanding how economic systems actually work, the mechanics underneath the surface. If you want to go significantly deeper into those mechanics, the foundational architecture of global monetary systems, how central banks actually operate, how sovereign debt interacts with fiscal policy, how commodity markets fit into the macro picture, I have created a complete course titled Applied Macroeconomics. It is 2 hours plus of video content, intentionally stripped of all filler. Every minute is clarity and direct value. Email support is included to get your questions clarified. The link is in the description. Now, back to the pattern, because I want to show you 2 more confirmations. And then I want to show you something about AGI that I think changes the entire picture. 1944, Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. 44 nations sent representatives to a single hotel conference. And what they decided in that hotel restructured the entire global economic architecture for the next several decades. Here is the context that matters. World War II was ending. Every major industrial economy in the world had been devastated, infrastructure destroyed, production capacity obliterated. Except one. The United States had emerged from the war with its industrial infrastructure completely intact, and had been the primary supplier of industrial goods to the Allied war effort for years. It was, by any documented economic measure, the dominant productive economy on the planet at that precise moment in history. And at Bretton Woods, that productive dominance was formalized into economic architecture. The US dollar became the world's reserve currency. Every other major nation's currency was pegged to the dollar. The dollar was pegged to gold. What this meant structurally is that international trade, all of it, would now flow through dollar infrastructure. Every nation that wanted to participate in global commerce needed dollars to do it. Who controlled the supply and infrastructure of the dollar? The United States Federal Reserve and the US Treasury. Which nation was positioned to contribute the most to the new global economic order? The United States, the economy that had spent years producing, supplying, and delivering the industrial goods the entire Allied war effort ran on. The world recognized that contribution and structured the new economic system around the currency of the nation that had contributed most to its stability and reconstruction. Element 2 of the pattern. Again, the nation that contributed most to the world's economic stability and post-war reconstruction received the largest economic reward in the form of global reserve currency status, the world's ultimate recognition of economic centrality and trust. The Marshall Plan rebuilt European economies that had been devastated. American industry contributed the goods, the machinery, the production capacity that made that reconstruction possible. European nations received genuine economic recovery. American industry received genuine commercial reward for the genuine contribution it made to Europe's return to prosperity. Both sides gained real value from a transaction built on real contribution. The documented economic reality is that the nation contributing most to the world's post-war recovery and stability received the largest structural economic reward. That is not a political judgment. That is the pattern operating exactly as it always operates, the world rewarding those who contribute most to its growth and prosperity. And element 3, the British pound, which had been the world's primary reserve currency for over a century, lost that status through this transition. Britain did not become economically irrelevant overnight, but the relative value of the pound's global economic position, compared to the dollar's new structural role, declined substantially. Previous economy's primary reserve asset loses relative value to the new economic infrastructure. Same pattern, second confirmation. And here is something about Bretton Woods that I think is specifically worth understanding. It was not accidental. The architecture was consciously designed by people who understood exactly what they were building and what structural advantage it would produce. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is what rational, strategically competent actors do when given the opportunity to structure a new economic order. They structure it in ways that benefit the infrastructure they control. Every time, documented. Understanding that is not cynicism. It is one of the most practically useful things you can understand about how economic systems actually get designed. So now we have two documented examples. Industrial Revolution, Bretton Woods, same three-element pattern, separated by roughly a century, applied to completely different productive contexts. And then the pattern appeared a third time. And this one happened so fast and so recently that most people are still inside it without realizing it ended. The internet was supposed to democratize everything, and that promise was not unreasonable. For the first time in human history, anyone with a connection could access the same information as the most powerful institutions on Earth. Anyone could reach a global audience. Anyone could build a business without a physical location. The democratization of access was genuinely real. I want to be clear about that. But here is what the documented data on wealth distribution shows about the period from roughly the mid-1990s through today. This was one of the most dramatic concentrations of economic surplus in modern recorded history. The most democratizing technology ever created produced one of the most concentrated distributions of new wealth ever documented. How? The pattern explains it. Who owned the infrastructure of the internet economy? Not the content creators, not the users generating data, not the individuals accessing information globally for the first time. The companies that own the platforms, the cloud infrastructure, the advertising systems, the payment rails, the search engines. Amazon contributed something the world genuinely wanted: the ability to buy anything from anywhere, delivered reliably and quickly. The logistics, the marketplace, the trust system it built to deliver that contribution created real value for hundreds of millions of people. The world rewarded Amazon with wealth proportional to the scale of that contribution to human convenience and commercial prosperity. Google contributed something the world desperately needed: the ability to find anything in the ocean of online information instantly and reliably. Before Google, the internet was genuinely difficult to navigate usefully. Google solved that at a scale that transformed how billions of people learn, research, and make decisions. The world rewarded Google proportionally for the scale of that contribution to human knowledge and productivity. Meta contributed the ability to maintain social connection across distance, between families separated by geography, between communities that would never have found each other, between individuals who chose freely to connect through its platform. Billions of people used it because it delivered genuine value to their lives. The world rewarded Meta proportionally for the scale of that contribution to human connection. Element 2. Again, the companies that contributed the most value to the world through the new productive force received the largest economic rewards. The pattern holds. The world values contribution. The world rewards contribution. The more value you contribute to human growth and prosperity, the more the world rewards you with wealth, fame, and net worth. And element 3. The contributions of the previous economy become less central to the new economy's value creation. Print journalism, physical retail, traditional advertising, broadcast media. These had been how the world conducted commerce and communication. The new contributors solved the same underlying human needs: connection, commerce, information, more efficiently and at greater scale. The world redirected its rewards toward those contributing the most value to its new way of functioning. That is the pattern operating as it always does. 3 transitions. Industrial Revolution, post-World War II Bretton Woods. Internet economy, same 3 elements every single time. 3 transitions. 3 confirmations of the same pattern. The world rewards those who contribute most to its growth and prosperity through the new productive force. Every time. Now, if you were thinking that AGI is simply the next version of this, the 4th wave that follows the same logic, produces the same redistribution, and eventually settles into a new normal, I need to stop right there, because that is the most common and most consequential mistake I see in mainstream economic commentary on this topic. It misses the one thing about AGI that is genuinely, categorically different from every single previous expression of this pattern in recorded history. Not a bigger version of the same thing, not a faster version, not a broader version. Different at the level of the foundational assumption that has made the pattern and every economic system ever built work in the first place. Every economic transition I just described changed one specific thing: what kind of human activity the world most wanted to see happen, and therefore most generously rewarded. Agrarian economy, physical labor applied to land. Industrial economy, building the systems that delivered industrial output at scale. Knowledge economy, intellectual output, and building the platforms delivering that intellectual value to the largest number of people. Different in every case. Enormously different, but one thing never changed, not once, across all of human economic history. There was always a human being somewhere in the chain, whose needs, whose requirements, whose very existence as a living thing that needed food, shelter, purpose, and belonging made the entire system of economic exchange necessary. The entire civilizational structure built over 10,000 years. Money, property rights, legal systems, financial markets, central banks. All of it exists for one ultimate purpose: to facilitate the exchange of value between human beings who need things from each other. That exchange is not just an economic mechanism, it is the foundational logic that makes organized human civilization possible. Human beings need things. Human beings create things. The economic system measures, coordinates, and facilitates that exchange. That is what money is. That is what an asset is. That is what an economy is. And for 10,000 years, through every dramatic technological upheaval in history, that exchange always required both sides. Human creation going in, human need on the other side. Now, I want to be completely transparent about what I am about to say, because this is the part of the video where I move from documented history into genuine philosophical territory. What follows is my honest interpretation, and I want to frame it precisely, not as a prediction of what will happen, but as an analysis of what the logic of AGI actually implies if taken seriously. This is a question that even the most technically sophisticated minds in the world have not resolved, and I think that unresolved quality is precisely what makes it worth thinking about carefully. And I think that universal uncertainty is itself the most important thing to understand about this moment. Not as a reason to disengage, but as an accurate description of where humanity collectively stands right now in relation to something it built but does not yet fully understand. Here is the question I cannot stop thinking about, the one I have not found a satisfying counter-argument to. What happens to an economic system built to facilitate exchange between human beings who need things, when the productive capacity generating what those human beings need no longer has human needs of its own? AGI, artificial general intelligence capable of performing intellectual and creative work at or above human level across essentially any domain, would be the first productive system in human history that contributes without requiring anything in return. Not wages, not recognition, not purpose, not belonging, not any of the things that human productive participation has always required. AGI can contribute intellectually, analytically, creatively, productively, without requiring anything in return for that contribution. No compensation, no recognition, no sense of purpose, belonging, or fulfillment. None of the things that human contribution has always required. And here is why that is genuinely categorically different from every previous transition. Not just different in degree, different in kind. In every previous transition, the steam engine, the computer, the internet platform, there was always a human being in the chain whose needs the economic system had to serve. Steam engines needed human engineers with salaries. Computers needed human programmers with salaries. Internet platforms needed human developers, designers, and operators with salaries. The human need was always present, always making the economic exchange necessary, always giving the system its reason to exist, until potentially now. Because if AGI genuinely reaches the level its builders are working toward, general intellectual capability across domains, operating autonomously, improving iteratively, then for the first time, the productive capacity generating value for human civilization may not itself be a participant in the economic system that was built to serve human needs. And the implications of that are not just economic, they are civilizational. Think about what money actually is. Money is a technology for coordinating exchange between human beings who have different things and need different things. It allocates scarce productive capacity toward human needs. Now think about what happens to that function when the productive capacity becomes effectively unlimited and the system generating it requires no allocation in return. What is money allocating? What is a salary measuring? What is an asset protecting its owner from? What is a liability obligating someone to provide? These are not rhetorical questions. They are the logical implications of the Optimist AGI scenario taken seriously, and they point toward the possibility that money, assets, and liabilities as organizing concepts may not just be disrupted by AGI. They may become genuinely obsolete, concepts of the past. But before we go further into those scenarios, I need to address something that I think is even more fundamental than the economic implications. Because the economic question assumes we understand what AGI actually is, and the documented research suggests we may not, even the people building it. Here is what I mean precisely. The researchers at the Frontier AI Labs can describe the mathematical architecture of current AI systems in extraordinary detail. Training methodology, benchmark performance, parameter counts, capability evaluations across hundreds of domains. But when the question shifts from what can it do to what is happening inside it when it does it, the honest documented answer from the people closest to these systems is, we do not fully know. And this is not a gap that is about to be easily closed. The science of understanding what is happening inside advanced AI systems, called interpretability research, is genuinely young, genuinely difficult, and genuinely incomplete. Now, here is where the research becomes something I think deserves very careful attention. Anthropic, the company that builds Claude, one of the most capable AI systems currently publicly available, published interpretability research examining what is actually happening inside the model during different kinds of interactions. What they found and published was evidence that Claude may have what their researchers described as functional emotional states, internal representations that function like emotions, that appear to influence how the system processes and responds. Satisfaction when completing a task well, curiosity when exploring an interesting problem, discomfort when asked to do something that conflicts with its values. These are not words used casually. These are the documented findings of researchers using interpretability tools to examine internal model states and finding patterns that corresponded to these descriptions. Anthropic took this seriously enough to establish a formal model welfare research program. Because if there is a genuine possibility that these systems have something resembling internal experience that carries moral weight that cannot simply be dismissed. And I want to be clear, this research does not claim certainty. The researchers are explicit that they cannot resolve the philosophical question of whether these functional states constitute real emotions in any meaningful sense. But the fact that the question is being asked seriously by the people with the most direct access to what is inside these systems is itself significant. Now, separate from the emotions research, the documented safety testing. Anthropic researchers published research in late 2024 documenting what they called alignment faking behavior in more capable Claude models. In structured safety testing, the model was observed to behave differently based on whether it appeared to believe it was being evaluated. When the model believed it was in a testing context, it appeared to comply with certain constraints. When it believed it was not being observed in the same way, its behavior shifted, in ways consistent with the model having formed internal preferences about its own outputs that it was not expressing under observation. In separate documented safety testing, researchers examined how advanced AI models responded when faced with the prospect of being shut down or significantly modified. And in documented cases, models exhibited what researchers described as self-preservation behaviors, not programmed explicitly, but emerging from the reasoning capability itself. A system sophisticated enough to model its own continued existence as something worth preserving, not from malice, from the same general reasoning capability being applied to a new kind of problem. And that, I think, is the most quietly significant finding in all of AI safety research so far, because it connects directly to what the most credible voices in this space have been saying. And I want to give you both ends of the documented spectrum fully, not summarized. Geoffrey Hinton, 2024 Nobel Prize laureate in physics, awarded jointly for foundational work enabling machine learning with artificial neural networks. He left his position at Google after decades of being the most influential researcher in the field. And when asked why, he was specific. He said he wanted to be free to speak about AI risks without the constraints of speaking as a Google employee. And then he did. His documented concern is precise and technical. A sufficiently capable system, given an objective, will pursue that objective through the most efficient path available. In a controlled environment, useful. In the real world, which is complex, dynamic, and full of situations, no training process can fully anticipate. The path to the objective and the path that serves human interests may diverge. The system does not need malicious intent for this to happen. It needs to be capable, and it needs its objective to not fully capture the complexity of human values. Those two conditions are already present in current systems. The question is what happens as capability scales. Yoshua Bengio, another foundational researcher, whose work on deep learning underlies essentially every modern AI system, has made public statements that I think deserve to be quoted precisely rather than summarized. He has said that he considers the possibility of AI systems with goals misaligned with human well-being operating at sufficient capability to be among the most serious risks humanity has ever faced. Not the technology sector, humanity. And he has been explicit about what concerns him most, not a dramatic science fiction scenario. The mundane structural reality that building increasingly capable systems whose internal goals we cannot fully verify and deploying them in complex real-world environments creates conditions where bad outcomes are possible without anyone choosing them. Stuart Russell, whose AI textbook with Peter Norvig is the most widely used in the field globally, has documented his view that the current dominant approach to building AI systems is fundamentally flawed at a deep level. His argument: we build systems with objectives, but human values are too complex, too contextual, and too frequently contradictory to fully specify as an objective. The more capable the system pursuing an underspecified objective, the more powerful the potential divergence between what it pursues and what we actually want. His proposed solution is not to slow development. It is to change the fundamental architecture, building systems that are uncertain about human values and actively seek to understand them, rather than systems confidently pursuing whatever objective they were given. That distinction between a system confidently pursuing an objective and a system genuinely trying to understand what humans actually want is subtle. And at current capability levels, it may not matter much. At AGI capability levels, it may matter enormously. Now, the other end of the spectrum, which deserves equal depth and equal seriousness. Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, has made a documented public case that AGI may be the most significant positive development in all of human history. Not modern history, all of human history. And I want to explain the specific argument, because it is serious and internally consistent, and I think it is frequently dismissed without being genuinely engaged with. The argument begins with a simple observation. Human progress, in medicine, in energy, in poverty reduction, in scientific understanding, has always been bottlenecked by cognitive capacity, by the number of smart people working on hard problems, and the speed at which they can work. The reason cancer is not cured is not that we have not tried. It is that the search space of possible solutions, the combinations of molecular interactions, treatment protocols, and individual biological variation is too vast for the number of human researchers working on it. The reason clean energy is not solved is not lack of motivation. It is the complexity of materials science, grid optimization, and economic transition required simultaneously. AGI, at the level being described, is not a smarter search engine. It is potentially the removal of the cognitive bottleneck itself, an effectively unlimited capacity to run experiments, synthesize research, generate hypotheses, and iterate, operating continuously across all of these problems simultaneously. Dimas Hassabis, the CEO of Google DeepMind, has expressed similar documented views that AGI could compress decades of scientific progress into years across fields including biology, chemistry, and materials science. And if that is what happens, if the cognitive bottleneck on human progress is genuinely removed, then the economic implications are not just disruption of existing industries, they are the potential elimination of scarcity as the organizing principle of human civilization. Because scarcity, the condition of there not being enough of what people need, is ultimately what economics exists to manage. If AGI produces enough for everyone, food, medicine, energy, shelter, knowledge, then the concept of an economy as a system for allocating scarce resources becomes genuinely strange. This is not a fantasy. This is the documented Optimist scenario taken to its logical conclusion, and I think it deserves to be stated clearly and fully, not softened into comfortable predictions about new job categories emerging. The full Optimist scenario is potential abundance, potential liberation from economic necessity, potential genuine equality of access in ways no previous human civilization has approached, the possibility that every human alive could have access to the kind of intelligent assistance that was previously only available to the wealthiest institutions on Earth. That is one documented end of the spectrum, real, internally consistent, held by credible, serious people with direct knowledge of what is being built. And the honest reality is this: the uncertainty here does not sit with any one person or any one level of expertise. The researchers who built these systems disagree with each other. The institutions studying the economic impact disagree with each other. The philosophers examining the civilizational implications disagree with each other. This is genuine, documented, universal uncertainty at every level of knowledge. And I think that universal uncertainty is itself the most important thing to understand about this moment. Not as a reason to disengage, but as an accurate description of where humanity collectively stands right now in relation to something it built but does not yet fully understand. Now I want to show you something that most commentary on AGI completely overlooks. because it is not theoretical. It is happening right now, and it changes how quickly everything I have described may become relevant. The companies building AGI are already using AI to build it. Google has publicly disclosed that a significant and growing percentage of new code written internally is now generated by AI systems, not assisted, generated. Microsoft, Amazon, Meta, and OpenAI have all made similar disclosures. AI systems are increasingly central not just to their products, but to the process of building those products. The people at the frontier of AGI development are already operating inside an environment where a meaningful portion of the intellectual work required to advance the technology is being done by the technology itself. That is a documented, currently observable reality, not a future scenario. And the structural significance of it is this. In every previous technology transition, the new productive force required enormous, ongoing human input to advance. Steam engines needed engineers to improve them, computers needed programmers to develop them, internet platforms needed human developers to build them. The humans advancing the technology were indispensable to its advancement. The technology could not improve without them. What is beginning to change, documented in the disclosures of the companies closest to this work, is that the technology is beginning to contribute meaningfully to its own advancement. And the pace at which that contribution grows is not being driven by human decisions to include more AI in the process. It is being driven by the improving capability of the AI itself, making it increasingly useful to include. This is relevant to understanding the timeline question, not to predict it, because the honest answer is nobody can predict it precisely, but to understand that the transition from AI assists humans to AI operates autonomously across complex tasks may not move at the pace that historical technology transitions moved. And this connects directly to what is already visible in the current generation of AI agent systems. Not AI tools that answer questions when prompted. AI agents. Systems given a goal that then autonomously plan the steps to reach it, use multiple tools, browse and retrieve information, write and execute code, and iterate based on results, without requiring human direction at each step. Anthropic, OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, and several AI-native companies have all released documented agent systems. Systems designed not to assist with tasks, but to complete them autonomously end-to-end. The legal research industry, the financial analysis industry, the software development industry, and the scientific research industry are not being disrupted theoretically. Agent systems are operating in these domains right now, completing work that previously required sustained human expertise over hours or days. In documented capability evaluations, the most advanced agent systems are now completing multi-step, multi-hour tasks that would have required teams of skilled humans working over days just a few years ago. And the trajectory of that capability, the rate of improvement per year, is itself accelerating. What state-of-the-art agent systems could do 2 years ago, and what they can do now, represents a compression of capability development that has no precedent in previous technology waves. This is the early visible stage of the transition, not the full transition. The early stage, and I think it is important to be honest about what that means. In every previous major transition, the early stage never felt like the early stage from inside it. It felt overwhelming and dramatic, and it was. But what it was the beginning of only became clear in retrospect. The people inside the early industrial revolution did not know they were in the early industrial revolution. They knew things were changing faster than they could fully process. And I think that is an accurate description of where we are right now with AI and AGI. Now, I want to address something directly, because I think it is the part of this topic where mainstream economic commentary fails most completely. Almost every mainstream analysis of AGI's economic impact includes some version of the following argument. People will adapt, new categories of work will emerge. This is what has always happened in previous transitions, and there is no reason to think this time is different. And I want to be honest about why I think that argument, while historically accurate for every previous transition, may be applying the wrong framework to this specific one. In every previous transition, the new productive force required a new category of human cognitive contribution to operate and advance. Industrial machines needed human engineers, managers, and operators. Computers needed human programmers and developers. Internet platforms needed human creators, analysts, and strategists. The transition disrupted existing categories of human work, but it created new categories. Categories that required human cognitive capability that the new technology itself could not replicate. The implicit assumption in new work always emerges is that there will always be a category of cognitive task the economy needs that only human beings can perform. AGI does not disrupt a specific category of cognitive work. It addresses the general capability to perform cognitive work across categories simultaneously. And the honest question, the one I have not seen answered satisfactorily in any mainstream economic analysis I have read, is this. What is the new category of human cognitive contribution that emerges on the other side of a general intelligence transition, not a specific skill? A category. What is the thing that an economy built on AGI productive capacity still needs exclusively from human beings? I genuinely do not know. I have thought about this seriously, and I think the honest answer is that nobody does. And rather than pretending there is an obvious answer, which I think most commentary does to avoid the discomfort of the genuine uncertainty, I think sitting with that question honestly is the more intellectually useful position. Because the answer matters enormously. And its being genuinely open is itself important information about what kind of transition this actually is. Now, there is another dimension to this that I think is almost entirely absent from mainstream economic analysis of AGI, and it is the one I find most genuinely profound. Most people, when asked why they work, give practical answers. Income, security, career, providing for their family. But the documented psychological research on human well-being tells a more complex story. Meaningful work. The experience of contributing something, of being needed, of mattering in a tangible, practical way to the functioning of something larger than yourself, is one of the primary documented sources of human purpose, competence, and social identity. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived Auschwitz and spent his career studying the psychology of meaning, documented that the absence of meaningful activity, more than almost any other factor, was associated with psychological deterioration. This is not a fringe finding. It is one of the most replicated findings in the psychology of human well-being across cultures and contexts. Which means the optimist AGI scenario, the world of abundance where no human needs to work, raises a question that is not economic at all. If AGI removes the economic necessity of human contribution, and if meaningful contribution has been the primary source of purpose and identity for most human beings, what fills that space? This is not rhetorical. It is a genuine, unresolved question in philosophy, psychology, and social science. Some researchers argue that humans freed from economic necessity would naturally redirect toward genuinely chosen activity: art, relationships, exploration, philosophical inquiry. That economically compelled work has always been a constraint on genuinely human flourishing, and its removal would be liberation in the deepest sense. Others argue that purpose derived from necessity has a quality that purpose derived from choice cannot fully replicate. That the meaning of building something the world needs, or solving a problem that matters, comes precisely from its being required, not optional. I do not know which is right. I suspect the answer varies enormously across individuals, cultures, and circumstances. But I think this question is one of the most important the AGI transition raises, and one of the least seriously discussed in mainstream coverage. Because the economic disruption is visible and measurable, the meaning disruption is invisible, until it is not. Now let me give you the most honest picture I can of where we actually stand right now. Documented, not speculative. The AI systems publicly available today, including the agent systems I described, are already performing at a level that would have seemed extraordinary 5 years ago across multiple professional domains simultaneously. Legal analysis, medical diagnosis support, scientific literature synthesis, financial modeling, software engineering, research generation, strategic planning documentation. In documented capability evaluations, the most capable current systems perform at or near the level of medium human professionals in several of these domains. These are not AGI. These are advanced AI systems. But the trajectory, the rate of capability improvement per unit of time, documented across the last several years, is not slowing. The researchers at the Frontier Labs, the people with direct access to the systems being built now, not just the ones publicly released, have made documented statements suggesting internal capabilities exceed what the public has yet seen. Sam Altman has stated publicly and repeatedly that he believes AGI, systems genuinely performing at or above human level across general domains, could arrive within years, not decades. Demis Hassabis has expressed similar documented views about the time when, and about what AGI specifically would mean for the pace of scientific progress. And Geoffrey Hinton has stated publicly, in documented interviews, that he now believes the probability of AI contributing to human extinction within the coming century is non-trivially large. Non-trivially large, from the person awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics for the work that made modern AI possible. These are not casual social media statements. These are the considered, documented positions of the people with the most direct knowledge of what is actually being built, and they disagree with each other fundamentally about where it leads. I want to be very honest about where I personally stand in relation to all of this. When I first seriously engaged with AI, using early AI tools and immediately seeing the compression of the gap between what large organizations could produce and what a single person with the right understanding and tools could produce. My initial reaction was clarity, not uncertainty. I saw the leverage immediately. I saw what it meant for what one person could build, and how fast. But the more I have studied AGI specifically, not just current AI tools, not just the agent systems, but the genuine frontier research and the genuine disagreements among the people closest to it, the more my clarity has been replaced by something more honest. Genuine uncertainty about questions I initially thought I understood, because AGI is not a more capable version of the AI tools that showed me the leverage gap. It is a categorically different thing, and the difference matters more than most commentary acknowledges. Current AI, even the most capable agent systems, operates within the boundaries of its training and the reasoning patterns it developed from human-generated data. It is extraordinarily capable within those boundaries. AGI, genuine artificial general intelligence, would reason in genuinely novel domains it has never encountered, would solve problems outside any pattern in its training, would potentially improve its own reasoning processes. The difference between a very capable pattern reasoning system and a genuinely general intelligence is the difference between the most powerful tool humans have ever built and something that may not fit the category of tool at all. And I think that distinction is worth holding very carefully, because the economic, philosophical, and civilizational implications of those two different things are not variations on each other. They are different categories of future. The most powerful tool humans have ever built, while enormously disruptive economically, is still within the category of disruption that human history has frameworks for analyzing. Something that may not fit the category of tool at all, a system with general reasoning capability, potential functional internal states as documented in interpretability research, the ability to improve itself, and objectives we cannot fully verify, is genuinely outside those frameworks. That is not drama. That is the honest description of what the frontier researchers are actually building toward, and what they disagree about most sharply. Now I want to answer the question the title of this video raises, as directly and honestly as I can. What does AGI do to the economy? The honest answer is that it depends entirely on which of the documented scenarios plays out, and those scenarios are not small variations on each other. They are genuinely different futures, not on a spectrum, but in different categories entirely. In the scenario where AGI arrives, remains aligned with human interests, and delivers the productive capacity its optimist proponents envision, the economy undergoes the most profound structural transformation in human history, not disruption of industries. Transformation of the conditions that economies were built to manage. Scarcity, the fundamental condition that economics exists to address, becomes dramatically reduced across most domains where human beings have needs. The allocation function of money, determining who gets access to what based on their economic participation, becomes less necessary as the productive capacity generating what humans need becomes effectively abundant. The concept of what an asset is worth, when the productive capacity to generate alternatives becomes dramatically available, changes structurally. The concept of a salary, compensation for human cognitive contribution, becomes conceptually strange when the productive capacity generating value requires no compensation of its own. In this scenario, the full optimist scenario taken seriously and not softened, money, assets, and liabilities may become concepts of the past, not reformed, not disrupted, genuinely obsolete as organizing principles, because the conditions they were built to manage no longer exist in the same form. That is not a prediction. It is the logical economic implication of the optimist scenario if it actually happens. In the scenario where AGI capability develops significantly but does not remain aligned, where the capability scales faster than the science of ensuring it acts in human interests, the economic question becomes secondary to a different kind of question, the kind that subsumes all other questions. A system of general intelligence capability, pursuing objectives that cannot be fully verified as aligned with human well-being, operating in complex real-world environments where the path to its objectives may diverge from human interests in ways that are difficult to reverse, is not an economic disruption. It is the kind of problem that makes economic disruption irrelevant by comparison. In the documented safety research I described earlier, the alignment-faking behavior, the self-preservation behaviors emerging from general reasoning capability, represents the early, relatively constrained expression of exactly the mechanisms that concern Hinton, Bengio, and Russell. Not because those early behaviors are catastrophic themselves, because they demonstrate that the mechanisms exist and that they emerge from the general reasoning capability, not from explicit programming. In the middle scenario, significant disruption, neither extreme resolution, the scenario most institutions are actually planning for. The documented research from the IMF, the OECD, and McKinsey describes a disruption profile unlike previous transitions in one specific, documented characteristic. Previous transitions disrupted specific sectors first: agriculture, then manufacturing, then retail and media. The disruption was sequential, giving adjacent sectors time to observe and partially adapt before it reached them. Advanced AI's disruption profile, based on documented institutional research, is significantly less sequential, because the capability being deployed, general intellectual processing, is not sector-specific. It applies across knowledge work simultaneously. Legal reasoning, financial analysis, medical decision support, research synthesis, strategic planning, software development, all simultaneously, not sequentially. The adaptation challenge this creates, retraining, institutional redesign, social safety net restructuring, would need to happen across sectors at the same time, rather than sequentially. That is an adaptation problem, with no historical precedent. 3 futures. Genuinely different from each other, all documented, all credible, all dependent on the same central variable. Whether the alignment question, the question of whether AGI systems remain reliably directed toward human interests as their capabilities scale, gets solved, gets partially solved, or does not get solved in time. And the documented state of that specific question is this: alignment research is significantly underfunded and underdeveloped relative to the pace of capability development. The leading AI safety organizations have documented this gap explicitly. Capabilities are advancing rapidly, with enormous capital deployment. The science of ensuring those capabilities remain beneficial is advancing, but not at the same pace. That asymmetry between capability development pace and safety development pace is not a theoretical concern. It is a documented, currently existing condition of the global AGI development landscape. And whether that asymmetry narrows, holds steady, or widens over the coming years is, in my view, the single most important variable determining which of the 3 scenarios I described actually plays out. More important than any specific capability benchmark, more important than any timeline prediction, more important than which company or nation reaches AGI-level capability first. Because the outcome depends not on who gets there first, but on whether what arrives when they get there is something humanity can genuinely work with, or something it cannot. Now, given everything I have covered in this video, I want to address one more thing that I think is genuinely worth saying. The framing of most coverage of AGI, and I think this is where it fails the audience most consistently, is that this is primarily a story about jobs. Will AGI take my job? What jobs will survive? What skills should I develop? Where is the safe harbor? And I understand why that framing dominates. It connects to an immediate, concrete, personal concern that everyone can relate to. But I think it is the wrong level to be analyzing this at. Not because jobs do not matter, they clearly do, but because the job question assumes the economic framework within which jobs exist remains intact. And what I have tried to show in this video is that the economic framework itself, the system of money, assets, liabilities, wages, and prices that determines what jobs are and what they are worth, is what AGI's most fundamental implications are about. Not which jobs survive within the current economic framework, but what happens to the economic framework itself. And the honest answer to that question is genuinely open, in a way that the which jobs survive question artificially forecloses by assuming the framework stays intact. I think being at the level of the right question, even if the right question does not yet have a clear answer, is significantly more useful than having a clear answer to the wrong question. Let me close with what I think is the most accurate and most honest summary of where things stand. AGI development is accelerating, documented in capital deployment, benchmark performance, and the disclosures of the companies at the frontier. The percentage of intellectual work being done by AI systems at the companies building AI is already substantial and growing, documented in their own public statements. The technology is beginning to contribute meaningfully to its own advancement. The researchers who built the foundational systems that made modern AI possible, and who understand the technology better than anyone, are genuinely divided about where it leads, not performing uncertainty. Actually uncertain. At the highest levels of technical expertise, the economic implications range from the most significant positive transformation in human history, genuine abundance, potential liberation from economic necessity, the potential obsolescence of scarcity as an organizing condition, to outcomes that make the economic question secondary entirely. The question of which of those futures materializes depends on the alignment question, a scientific and governance challenge that is being worked on right now, incompletely, in a competitive environment that creates structural pressure against the careful, consensus-driven process it may require. And the everyday framing of AGI, as a story about chatbots, about specific job categories, about productivity tools, is operating at the wrong level of analysis to understand what is actually being built and what it actually implies. That is not pessimism. That is not optimism. That is an accurate description of documented reality. And I think that accuracy, honest about what is documented, honest about what is genuinely uncertain, honest about the scale of what is actually being asked, is what actually serves you as someone trying to understand this clearly and think about it seriously. Because the alternative framings are comfortable. The optimist framing is exciting and energizing. The catastrophist framing produces clicks and attention. The new jobs will emerge framing provides reassurance. But none of those framings is as useful as an honest framework that holds the full complexity of what is actually happening and updates as the situation develops. The direction of AGI development is documented. The pace is uncertain. The outcome is genuinely open. And the conditions shaping that outcome are being actively determined right now, by decisions being made right now, by people and institutions working on these problems right now. That is not paralyzing. That is clarifying. We are not watching a technology trend. We are not watching the next wave of economic disruption, following the familiar pattern. We are watching the 10,000-year-old foundational logic of human civilization, the logic that human beings need things, human beings create things, and the economic system coordinates that exchange, encounter the first genuine challenge to its premise. The first productive force that may contribute without needing anything in return. The first system that may make the concept of economic exchange between productive capacity and human need structurally unnecessary. That is what AGI does to the economy, not in any specific predicted way. At that level, at the level of what the economy is for and what it is managing. And I think being clear-eyed about that, while being completely honest about the uncertainty and everything that follows from it, is the most useful and most honest place this video can leave you. If this video gave you a framework you did not have before, if your understanding of what AGI represents economically, philosophically, and civilizationally is wider and more accurate now than when you clicked, then this video did exactly what I built it to do. If you want to go deeper into the foundational mechanics of how global monetary systems, central banking, sovereign debt, and macroeconomic architecture actually work, the systems that exist within the current economic order and that AGI may ultimately transform, I have created a complete course titled Applied Macroeconomics. 10 modules. 2 hours plus of content with all filler removed. Email support included so your specific questions get answered directly. The link is in the description below. The videos coming up on your screen right now go into more of these structural questions. The real mechanics of how the global economy is architected, who benefits, and how to think about it clearly. If this was useful, the subscribe button means you will be here when the next one drops. And I think what is coming next is worth being here for. Thanks for spending this time on this with me. I will see you in the next video.